So you clicked on this video for one of two reasons. Either you're currently a residential realtor and you've been thinking about getting into the commercial world, or you're a brand new real estate agent and you've been focusing on commercial your whole entire life beforehand, and you're just wondering about how to dominate in the industry right away. So in this video, I'm going to be answering every single one of your questions and knowing exactly what I would do if I was going to jump into the commercial real estate world and dominate my market. What would I be focusing on to be the best commercial realtor that I possibly could be in my market? Well, there's three specific things I want to break down your specialties when it comes to commercial real estate. The first thing that I would talk about is know your asset class better than anybody else. If you want to know why people focus on going to one commercial broker in a certain area over another, it's because they are an absolute expert at their asset class. Choose one asset class. Do you like retail? Do you like office buildings? Industrial? Multifamily? What do you have any interest in? And that thing is what I would focus on for the first year or two of your career. Be niche. Niche into your asset class. That is the first thing and foremost. You need to know your asset class better than anybody else in the industry. Now, this goes to understanding like literally everything you need to know about it. Because when it comes to hypothetically multifamily, every single state, every single submarket, call it counties or tri-county areas, they have different ways of looking at multifamily. And let me explain. When you're in areas like where I am here in New Jersey, there's a lot of garden style apartments, which is anywhere between 1 story to really as high as 3-story commercial multifamily apartment buildings. This is typically garden style apartments, right? They're not, super tall high rises, and there's really not a lot of 1 stories, to be honest, right? There's a lot of 2 and 3 story garden style apartments. This is incredibly common, which also means that there's a lot of roof space. There's a lot of siding that you have to be taking care of. There's typically a lot of windows you got to be taking care of. Like, this will definitely shift the way a typical buyer is going to be looking at multifamily, because listen, there's a specific buyer who will buy high rises out here. Very, very different than a typical buyer, because most buyers by me, there's really not a ton of huge multifamily properties by me. A lot of it is typically 5 to 100 units. Like that, the middle ground is huge in New Jersey. So if you have a really good grasp on those types of markets, like there's an incredible amount of multifamily that are even just between a duplex and a 10 unit. There's an incredible amount of towns that have that specific type of multifamily. And then you really have the higher level stuff, which is like really anywhere between 20 units and call it 100 units. I mean, there's a huge difference between, you have to really understand these two different markets, who's buying them, understand every single nuance about those types of asset classes, because it's like having an asset class within an asset class. If you know this type of asset better than anybody else, that is why people are going to go to you. That is going to be the main reason. So number one, become an expert, know your asset classes. Number 2, know your geographic area and try to be ultra focused, because in New Jersey is a very compressed state. 8 to 10 million people live in a very compressed specific square footage in the state of New Jersey, unlike a really spread out state like California or Texas or Florida. It's a very condensed state. So the reason why I say this is in New Jersey, one county could, I know it could be like, call it 20 or 30 towns, but it's it's a very small geographic area. But if you can, hone in on one county, there's a lot of money to be made just in knowing one county. In some other areas like Houston, Texas, you could probably know one city that you could focus on, maybe one town. Like Austin, in one town, you can get a lot of business done. Out in New Jersey, you do one town, there's not enough business for everyone to eat, if that makes sense to you. So just you want to know your geographic area. If you did one town by me here in New Jersey, it's like knowing one street. You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, it's not that small, but it's basically the same thing here in New Jersey. There's only so many transactions. You want to be looking in an area where there's typically anywhere between 500 and 2,000 transactions a year. So in one county, there's about that here in New Jersey. So by you need to be looking at what counties by you or what towns by you have that kind of traffic. So, pay attention to that kind of nuance. But things like price per square foot, rental rates, you want to know absolutely everything when it comes to your market. When you're talking to clientele, you want to know these things like the back of your hand. Again, becoming an expert in that asset class is more than just understanding the asset class in itself. It's knowing your geographic area and why certain areas are better buys than other areas. Because listen, I've been to a lot of towns where certain sections of a fantastic, gorgeous A-class area, there's certain sections of that area where you're like, I can understand why people don't want to buy here. They're like D-class areas in those areas, right? Or vice versa, where there's like a B market, but there's A-class areas in those B markets. Like you want to be able to tell a buyer, listen, this is the best area to buy. This is actually undervalued. You could see two properties that are like, call it a mile or two apart. They could be completely different prices. I have a town that has an east side and a west side. The east side here in New Jersey is like waterfront property. The west side is a lot more inland and it's a little bit less valued, right? It's not going to be that highly valued because, listen, when you're a block from the beach or on the beach, that's like luxury property here in New Jersey. But when you're, call it a mile or two inland, it's a very different price point. So it's the same exact thing. You need to know these types of nuances because a 10-unit building on the water versus a 10-unit building 2 miles in the same town are completely different price points and have completely different rental rates and have completely different clientele that are going to be living in them. So you need to be paying attention to that type of nuance. And this is why I bring up being niche in your market and understanding a geographic area as much as I say so. The last thing that I would talk about is know your clientele better than they know themselves. So what I'm trying to express here is that there is a specific reason why somebody's looking to buy any type of asset class. I know I bring up multifamily a lot. I do a lot of multifamily transactions. It's an asset class that I love. And typically when somebody's looking at a multifamily property, this is the way I want you to think about it. When someone comes to me and they say, Henry, I'm looking for like a 2, 3, or 4 family, most of the time that's a newer investor. When someone comes to me and they say, yeah, we're looking for anywhere between 10 and 30 units, typically they've owned a lot of other apartment buildings, and this is somebody who's a little bit more savvy. So most of the time, you need to know your clientele because hypothetically, when I have somebody who says, well, I'm looking for anything between 2 and 4 units, and if they come to me and they say they're, let's say they own another 20 properties that are all around the same, they like these small properties, typically they're looking for one of two things, cash flow, or are they looking for more appreciation and willing to pay a little bit more top dollar? Because I have two different type of clients all the time. I have one person who's willing to pay fairly close to retail because they want the appreciation and they just got to move money and they don't want it sitting in the bank. And then they have the other side of the coin of an investor who's looking for a major value add and will never pay anywhere near retail. Very, very different types of clienteles. And if you try to send the guy who's looking for value add the type of retail properties that this guy over here will buy, they're not going to think you know what you're talking about, which is why I'm trying to explain becoming an expert and knowing your clientele is going to be incredibly important. Because the last thing, and I say this to every one of my clients, the last thing I want to do is send you a deal that absolutely doesn't meet your criteria. It's like someone who's looking to retire. They're 75, 80 years old. They're looking to finally retire after everything. And they're looking for a single family ranch and you're sending them a condo high-rise, a walk-up building, like a 3-story townhouse, or there's no elevator. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. What I like to express to people is like, I want to bring you a deal on a silver platter. I want to know exactly what you want so detailed. I want to understand it so well that anytime I send you a property, it's a home run. And I know some of my clients so well that if I have a property and I bring it to them, it's almost a deal 99% of the time because I am so clear. So I don't have to work so hard in trying to, always like, oh, I don't know if they're gonna like it. I know they're gonna like it, right? So that's why you wanna get really clear on what they're looking for. And the last thing I'll say is this. If there is somebody who's coming to where it's their first investment property, they might need to see quite a lot of property before they ever pull the trigger. Okay, and the reason why I bring this up is because I know some of you who are watching this video might be fairly new to this business. And if you have a client who's an investor and they're looking to buy their first investment property, you can get really excited because let's just say their budget's $1 million. All right, that sounds really exciting. However, just know, I've worked with a lot of first-time investors. This is a really tough market for first-time investors. Really tough, especially with interest rates as high as they are right now. I'm telling you, you might end up showing this person, that investor, numerous properties before they pull the trigger on the first one. What I suggest you try to do is try to find an investor who owns already 1 or 2 or 3 properties or so and is looking for their next property, and they can get very crystal clear with exactly what they're looking for in a specific area. So this way you know exactly what to hunt for. Because if you don't know what to hunt for, it's kind of hard to prospect. Because I know that I, back in the day, had a little bit tough time finding deals because I didn't know what to look for. But once I got a crystal clear idea of saying, hey, and in the residential world, I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath or more, or a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a garage in this town for this price point. Okay, I know that I can find that deal pretty easily because now you've given me an idea. But if I just say, hey, I'm looking for a great flip in the area, How do you know what to look for, right? So in the commercial world, it's the same exact thing. Hey, I'm looking for multifamily. I'm looking for a 2 to 4 unit building. I'm looking for an 8 to 20 unit building. I'm looking for retail. I'm looking for a 4 to 10 unit strip center. I'm looking for a 1 tenant strip center. I'm looking for a warehouse space, 10 to 20,000 square feet with 6 bays for commercial trucking. Again, you want to get as crystal clear as possible so you're not just running around like a chicken with their head cut off. So again, become an expert in your asset class, become an expert in your market, and know your client better than they know themselves. With those 3 things, you're going to dominate in your commercial real estate market. Other than that, guys, I love you so very much. Comment down below if you have any more questions. I want to be a resource, everything real estate related. I love you so much, and I'll see you soon.